Good evening. This is a tradesight market preview for Friday, March 1st, 2013. Wanted to take a look at the state of the indices here real quick, and also the action from Thursday on the markets, just to get us set up in our mindset proper. Remember that Thursday was the 28th of February. It's the last day of the month. We're heading into the weekend where the federal sequester on the budget begins. A lot of spending cuts going to kick in. A lot of people will be out of work from that if they don't figure out a way to get around it. Market hasn't seemed to panic yet, but I'm sure if it drags on without a solution, we're going to start to see a problem. The bad news is that the technicals of the market are showing a rollover anyway, and I wanted to talk about that. But first of all, here's the action from Thursday with our ES levels from Thursday. This is Wednesday's trade, which is a positive day, and then Thursday's trade. You'll notice, by the way, Wednesday, which is an up day here, we got a Comer setup phase right here, and then the 1 to 13 count. The 13 actually hit right here in the morning on Thursday. That was the short-term top until late in the afternoon. So amazing how that worked out. And we had pretty much a flat day here. You can see how much time we spent on this purple line. That's the VWAP. As soon as they came back from lunch in the last 2 hours of play, direction was back to the downside. They came right back down to the VWAP, and then we're glued to it. And then the last 10 minutes that the stock market was open, we sold off sharply. And then these next 3 bars are after the stock market closes up till future settlement. You'll notice we hit exactly the pivot line. So some interesting technicals there. Late day sell-off was probably the most exciting action of the day. But let's talk about what that means for the S&P daily chart. I think that's the biggest thing to be focused on. So here is the daily chart of the S&P 500 index, and here's what you can see from here is the seeker setup phase. So we've got a 1 through 9 setup phase here in January, and then the seeker count itself. Prefer the seeker over the Comer on the longer term time frames like the daily charts. So here's a look at that setup, and we had talked last week about the fact that we wanted to see if we could get the 12 and 13, actually get a 13 sell signal before the market rolled. The sharp drop on Monday sort of prevented us from getting that early in the week. But the fact that we're back up here, we closed today above the high of 2 bars back. That gives us the 12 today, which means that tomorrow, Friday, all we need to do is close above this high right here, Wednesday's high, very small up day at a minimum, to get us the 13 sell signal in place here. Now, why is that significant? Because if I also roll to the weekly chart of the S&P, we've had a 13 sell signal there just a couple weeks ago, and you can see the pink risk line that we tried to get above last week but couldn't close below it. Used it as the high so far this week, rolling over here. So if we can get a 13 on the daily, we've got a 13 sell signal there and a 13 sell on the weekly that's been respecting the risk level. It's pretty strong. I mean, a very, very strong double indicator for a rollover in the market. Now, how far is this roll going to take us? That's the big question everybody wants to ask, obviously. Is this a big deal? Well, if you look at this as we start to roll because of the sequester and the cuts and just the general disappointment of everything that's going on in Washington from that aspect, then obviously if they can ever get this thing resolved in the next few weeks, it could turn the market back to the upside. At the same time, if we look at some downside targets, the 1400 level on the S&P, there's a static trend line on the daily. Okay, you got a lot of support at 1350 from 2011's highs. Okay, and if I go back to the daily chart once again, that 1400 had the static trend line on the weekly, but there's a 1451 here. So these would be some of your targets for about 1455, 1400, and then maybe back to 1350 or so. Those would be your 3 targets if this turns into a significant downside move. We'll see how that goes. But I would think if we can just get the 13 on the daily here, next week would be the beginning of the push lower, and I think we can at least expect that pullback down to that area, and with a pretty solid reason to believe it. And as we start to see it, we'll be making a lot more money on the short side off of our calls. So we'll see how it goes, but obviously it starts with Friday being a very slightly up day in the end. We'll see how that goes. Have a good session.